Mike, here we are in the
I'm sure you're going to start then.
yeah. Here we are in the legislative chamber where Premier Tim Houston has learned a valuable lesson, and that is something that premiers I've covered going back to the 1990s, have admitted to before, and that is moving from this side of the House in opposition to that side.
It's not everything is as easy and quick as it seems like from the opposition side.
It's the benefit of having more information, isn't it? And the Premier admitted as much earlier this week when talking about their efforts to remove the tolls from the Cobequid Pass. I think they'd like for that to go faster than it has. But we've also seen that with the government's approach to housing. Tim Houston adamantly opposed to rent control in opposition on the campaign trail. He probably still is. But now that he's Premier, he's got to be pragmatic, and he recognizes that given the housing climate right now, rent control has to stay. So that's been legislated for 2 more years.
The justification is we're in the midst of a crisis. And if we want to talk about a crisis, let's talk about the climate crisis. And another example where things are a little more complicated in government than in opposition. The opposition parties tabling amendment after amendment after amendment, 32 of them last night, and the government saying, yeah, not so much.
Shall the amendment carry?
No, carry.
The amendment is defeated.
We can talk about the government learning how some things are more challenging, but that's also an example of the government learning how nice it is sometimes to have the power of a majority government. For 8 years, the Tories were on that side of the House at the receiving end of Liberal governments that, frankly, were not very receptive to opposition amendments and not very interested in cooperating very often. And so the Tories are now learning that when they want to and when it makes sense, yeah, they'll collaborate. Yes, they'll entertain and accept amendments. But when they want to get through here and they want to get their business done, they benefit from that majority power. And so we've seen long, late hours called down here. We've seen, as you mentioned, in some cases, no interest in accepting amendments, be they from the public or the opposition. And that'll be a balance that they continue to walk through this mandate, when to wield that power and when to sit on that power.
Either this week or early next week, the work of governing will move out of this chamber across the street to one government and actually do more of the work that they need to do on housing, on the environment, and on a whole host of other things because they've still got plenty on their plate.